long story short, I ended up being the first person in the military to publicly refuse to participate in the Iraq War. And that's what this campaign is about, the right to refuse.
When George W. Bush Jr. said that Iraq is developing weapons of mass destruction, and I told myself, I'm not going to take part in this. I already had 2 kids at the time.
So today is a day of action across the United States. Our vets and community members taking the streets through Vets Say No to ICE. We say no to occupation, and we say no to the cuts to our safety net.
This is why this campaign is super important to get out to active duty people, because I was one of those people that rather than having the courage of Stephen, who stood up and then people came to him, I needed to feel that support beforehand, and I didn't see it anywhere.
This is Marisol Cortez, Executive Editor of Deceleration at Deceleration.news. Our podcast today is a community conversation we recorded on November 11th, Veterans Day, as part of a gallery exhibit called Veteran Voce, organized by the local chapter of About-Face, Veterans Against the War. Though the exhibit has now closed, check our post online for photos of the pieces, which are incredibly powerful. Many of them are by veteran artists who suffered abuse or assault during their service, or who reflect on the moral injuries that have come from participation in war, invasion, and occupation of other lands. One of the most haunting pieces is Regina Nelson's Fatigue's Clothesline, which features testimonio from thousands of military rape survivors scrawled on hanging garments. Similarly, Dangerous Times by Charlie Reynolds, who is a trans and disabled artist from Michigan, remembers Vanessa Guillen, the young Tejana assaulted and murdered at Fort Hood, as a way of grappling with his own personal history of assault in the military. Other artists visiting San Antonio with the exhibit reflected on their experience as conscientious objectors. A former Marine from the Bay Area, Stephen Funk refused to participate in the invasion of Iraq, and as a result was imprisoned for 6 months, fined, and demoted. To help close out a week of activities connected to Veteran Voce, Funk joined in the closing panel with local veteran organizers Giovanni Reyes, Jake Tucker, and Rachel Tucker, who above all sought to connect long histories of veteran activism against war and occupation to the present moment, marked by the Trump administration's deployment of U.S. military to U.S. cities as agents of domestic policing. Above all, the panel sought to remind us that Armistice Day was originally and remains a protest against war rather than its celebration, and soldiers have a right to refuse when given illegal and immoral orders. Thank you for being here and for listening. Here is Right to Refuse, a community conversation.
Welcome. Thank you again for coming out. My name is Rachel Tucker. I'm with About-Face Veterans Against the War. And I'm really honored to be here in this community conversation with friends and comrades that are part of the struggle for not only for our liberation, but anti-imperialism and anti-militarism as well. And so I want to give a big thank you to Galeria E.V.A for hosting Veteran Voce and having us use their space. So everybody just give it up to Galeria E.V.A. Galeria has been here, I think, now 11 years, and they've always welcomed About-Face Veterans Against the War. They offer solidarity to us, and so we're able to use their gallery for multiple days for less cost than they would for like other big events. So we really love them and appreciate them so much. Maestra Veronica, she comes from the family that does árboles de vida. So she's a ceramicist, a sculpturist. And so her family is famous for providing the world this beautiful art. And so check out the gallery when you have a chance. She does all sorts of different, she hosts all different kinds of events here. So let this not be the last time that you come. So who is About Face Veterans Against the War? We are post 9/11 military members and veterans organizing to end foreign policy of permanent war and the use of military weapons, tactics, and values in communities across the country and across the world. As people intimately familiar with the inner workings of the world's largest military, we use our knowledge and experiences to expose the truth about these conflicts overseas and the growing militarization in the United States. In San Antonio, we go by About Face Veterans Against the War, South Texas. The branch or crew has been around in San Antonio since 2013. The organization itself was started in 2003, right? So if you are a post 9/11 veteran, like, we would love to have you. And so here in this space, we're celebrating Armistice Day, or commemorating, because we're not celebrating shit. We're commemorating Armistice Day, and then we have Veteran Voce through the inside of the gallery with artwork from us local veterans here, and then also from this year, we're honored and happy to have Charlie's work all the way from Detroit. So thank you so much for sharing everything with us, Charlie. And to all of our fellow artists. One of the fellow artists, Tony Alevato, unfortunately, he was in a accident today. He was going to be a panelist, and so he's not able to join us. He's okay. Everything's fine. But we do miss him in this space dearly. And so Veteran Voce is a collection of artwork done by Veterans Against the War veterans, and also just veterans in general who want to submit art that shares their experiences, their pain, and their critique of the military-industrial complex and what they've been through. So this is our third Veterans Resistance Gallery. The first one was in 2019. Then COVID happened, so we weren't able to continue it. And last year was our resurgence. And then this year is, as you have seen or will see, the beautiful artwork inside. And so we think this gallery is really important to us because Veterans Day can be a very difficult day for anti-war, anti-imperialist veterans. As a society, can't help but thank us for our service, and really, like, many people don't even know what the hell they're thanking us for, right? And so thanking us for bombing sovereign and countries, for killing families, and for destabilizing governments that have been many chosen by their people. And so we put this gallery together as a counter narrative to the one that's imposed on us by the ruling class. We fight the mainstream Veterans Day narrative with our experiences, with our pains, and, you know, with everything that we're supposed to keep quiet and not talk about, right? And we refuse to do that. And because everybody needs to hear the experiences that happened to us in the military. We fight the glorification of the military and the United States war machine. We stand opposed to the United States war machine. We stand opposed to our government spending $1 trillion of our dollars just this year, and the year before $895 billion, and the year before $893 billion, and the year before, you could get the picture, right? Meanwhile, we don't have money for food. Meanwhile, we don't have money for our needy. Meanwhile, we don't have universal health care. Meanwhile, like us, many of us vets, have PTSD and are broken because they use us up and spit us out. So we also have this gallery to show that Armistice Day was a day for peace, not a day of uplifting war and a soldier. Armistice Day was done on the 11th day at the 11th hour and the 11th month to basically end all wars during World War I. And as you can see, our country does not stop aggressions, be them by military force or sanctions or any other kind of aggression which does not let people actually live around the world. So take some time after, check it out, and let us know what you think about it. So today is a day of action across the United States. We are joining over 90 different actions happening either through marches by our vets and community members taking the streets, through Vets Say No, to ICE. We say no to occupation and we say no to the cuts, to our safety nets, and then here in town we are having an educational conversation, and I look forward to getting it off the ground. So earlier this year, Trump started deploying National Guard to progressive cities to quote unquote stop crime, when crime is actually down. However, unchecked crimes on our community done by the means of violence, so police and deployed military and ICE, goes unchecked. In San Antonio, we've seen a record number of police killings of our people. And then just yesterday, we saw the acquittal of Melissa Perez's killers, 3 SAPD officers that were acquitted for killing a woman who was having a psychotic episode. She needed mental health care, not to be shot and killed. So Abbott was the first to volunteer our brothers and sisters to the border, many detaining their own people. He volunteered his personal army to Chicago and to other cities around the United States. Trump also used our taxpayer money to have a parade for his birthday. And now government workers have been paid in over a month, and SNAP benefits are paused, causing millions of families, elderly and disabled, to not have that safety net. I do need to say that this is bigger than Trump. This is capitalism and imperialism coming home to roost. It is the war at home expanded, because many of our people have been, especially us oppressed people, we've been feeling it forever. About Face launched the Right to Refuse campaign on July 4th because U.S. soldiers are ordered to carry out illegal, immoral, or unjust orders, and this represents an existential threat to the Constitution and the rule of law. The campaign calls on Congress to codify the right of any service member to refuse participation in any operation they believe is unjust or immoral. Military members are obliged to disobey illegal orders, but to do so, they risk military prison. They currently have no protected rights to refuse participation in operations they believe are immoral or unjust. For decades, Congress has failed to rein in and even has cheerleaded rampant waste, fraud, and abuses of presidents and the Department of Defense, with this year's, now Department of War budget reaching $1 trillion, by the way. This does not count money towards ICE and other means of violence in our communities. With this campaign, we have a chance for Congress to step up and fight for the rights for our service members. So today, I am very honored to we're joined by Giovanni Reyes over here, and they'll get into a little more detail of who they are. Stephen Funk, and then Jake Tucker, to speak about our experience as veterans. how to use these experiences in our political context / moment. What is our role as veterans and people of conscience, and why it's important to fight within the belly of the beast of the United States, but more so like within the belly of the beast of Texas, to end militarization and imperialism. And so each panelist will speak for up to 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. But yes, without further ado, we'll start with Stephen.
Hi, y'all. My name is Stephen Funk. I joined the military after 9/11. My middle name is Eagle. I was named after my uncle who was killed in the military. And so from birth, I've kind of had this magnet drawn me into the military. But it's also very fatalistic because he was killed, so. And after 9/11, I enlisted, and but my background before then was I went to a very progressive high school in Seattle. We sat around in circles. We called teachers by their first names. There were no tardy bells. We all protest. The school was shut down during the WTO in Seattle because the teachers were like, just go out and get your education in the streets. So that was my background going into the Marines. And I got in there, and I just knew right away it was the wrong thing. It was the wrong turn. But, you're trapped at that point. And I saw people around me change, and physically and mentally, and so many people get hurt in boot camp, don't even make it through. Or they get held back a cycle and go through it again, I guess. When I was in boot camp, we were doing rifle qualifications. I actually shot the best. And it was like announced to everybody. They said, hey, everyone gathered it around. The limp-wristed recruit from San Francisco shot better than all of you.
That's what they put it? Oh my God.
Yeah. And so everybody is gathered around, and we're about to go from there. This is pre-qualifications, not actual qualification. And we're about to go from there to go through this obstacle course that we had gone through earlier in the day, but now it's pitch black night. And it's the idea of this obstacle course is there's tracer bullets flying above, there's sounds of explosions, and so you're supposed to like steel your nerves and run through this dark obstacle course. And I was about 20 paces in, and someone struck me from behind on we were wearing our helmets and our stuff, but on the back of my helmet, with the butt of their rifle. And we're all running towards this light. There's a light at the end of this dark thing. And I just ran towards the light. I don't remember my feet touching the ground because I felt like I was gonna be killed. And I woke up in my bed. Someone had put hot sauce on my face. From the little MREs, you could put the Pasco bottles. And so I woke up, and the guards were laughing, snickering, and I went over to them and said, in my Ralph Wiggum voice, my face feels like burning. I made a joke out of it. The next morning during actual qualification, you have a field journal, it has your notes in it, like where to shoot on the target in order to make a better shot. And they stole my field journal, and I get to I realize, and I go, okay, I guess I'll just shoot blind though. But they But they said, go get your field journal. I'm like, someone took it or I can't find it. And they made me run under the tunnel. There's a tunnel under the firing range because you're going, like 50 yards out or whatever. So you can't run across the firing range. So they had this tunnel underneath. And it's like a tunnel with a light at the end. And I was like, my mouth, I had all my breath stolen away. And I made it through, and I had to go and shoot, and I still shot expert, but I wasn't the very, very best. But yeah, my drill instructor totally set me up to get assaulted. But when I got to the firing range, my coach was like, you shot really good yesterday, but don't be cocky about it, because in real combat, you would not shoot as well. I was like, yeah, because killing is wrong, and I think that is wrong. And that's not what you tell your rifle instructor in boot camp, but that's what I did. And I, was always in trouble from that point on. But long story short, I ended up being the first person in the military to publicly refuse to participate in the Iraq War. I was the first public conscience objector. And that's what this campaign is about, the right to refuse. When I spoke out, I was the first. This is when they were bulldozing over the Dixie Chicks albums. And the only person on TV was Michael Moore talking about anything. And what else was going on? Anyways, it was that moment. And it was before this organization existed. And but I was in the Bay Area, and it was amazing how much stuff came together just out of the remnants of previous generations of conscientious objectors. For example, Amy Allison, who is a conscientious objector in the Persian War, who was also public. Jeff Patterson, he was the first person in that conflict. We were always hanging out. He ended up creating an organization called Courage to Resist, which was all about conscience objection and getting people, getting the word out to people in the military that that was an option. One thing I would like to see a lot about this campaign is that it needs to be really modernized, just like the issue of rape in the military has been re-examined and modernized. Because really, conscious objection is a really old idea. If you think of like religious only situations, and it shouldn't be that. It shouldn't be that you had to be like a Catholic, I don't know what are they called? Altar boy. Yeah, it shouldn't be that that's the only way, I mean, anyway. But it also should be just like the issue of rape, it should be taken out of the chain of command, because they are immediately offended by a conscientious objector. And you can also have wildly different chains of commands have different interpretations of what that is. And so it's not just that's true for everything in the military, but that specifically is gonna not work. So I guess they were trying to make an example out of me. And luckily, with all the support I had, it just came out of, I felt like a complete idiot, right? But because I was so unprepared to do all that as a 19-year-old with no media training, all these people came out who had a little bit more experience, and organizations were built up around these people, who wanted to support the next generation. This organization is heavily drew on a lot of support from Veterans for Peace, which is essentially the Vietnam era version of this organization that used to be called Vietnam Veterans Against the War. And so with their help, I kind of made an example. I wanted to be an example of like how much fun you could have as a conscience objector. And, you know, I used all that to leverage going to a good school. I ended up getting my degree at Stanford, and Condoleezza Rice handed me my diploma. Stuff like that happens. And I was, you know, like I moved back to the Bay Area, and I never thought I would be hanging out with veterans again. I thought that was over and I would move on, but when Iraq Veterans Against the War formed, which I'm an honorary founding member. I resisted because first of all, it's called Iraq Veterans and I was not an Iraq veteran, but it's been amazing to see this organization evolve over 20 years. And the amount of community and catharsis and art that has been produced from, I don't know how many people have been in this organization over the years, but it's the art really has been like kind of the best evidence of our of what we do. So I appreciate this show in its third year. I think it's been great, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Awesome. And now we'll get to Giovanni Reyes. Please introduce yourself.
How you doing, everyone? Thank you for coming. My name is Giovanni Reyes. I'm an Army veteran, 12 years, active duty, 2 years reserves. I came in the 90s. 93, I was a military child. I grew up in a military system, pretty much based. My dad was in the military for about 26 years, I believe, between National Guard and active duty. But yeah, so, you know, I joined the military because it was pretty much a natural thing to do, being a military child. You know, most people in the military nowadays, right, come from military families, right? Or they come from the South. A lot of people come from I want to say like 70%, I think, somewhere I read, they come either from the South of the United States, which is the poorest states, versus the North and whatnot, and military families, right? So it was a natural thing for me to do. All my friends were doing it, you know, and, you know, college wasn't in my view. It was just, you know, that was just high school military. So I joined at 19, roughly about 6-9 months after I graduated, something like that. But I did have a somewhat political conscience when I joined the military, mostly, you know, around, I've always been an avid reader of history. I had, you know, a consciousness of the 1960s and 70s in the United States and everything. So, you know, so I had a political conscience when I came in the military. Also, when I was on the base I was in, they deployed to the Panama invasion. The people, I was in the transportation base, so they took part in the invasion of Panama in 1989. I believe I was in 8th grade or 9th grade when that happened, and I remember being impressed by it, by the mobilization of people in the base I was in, and they went there, and I saw the images in CNN, what was happening in Panama and everything. I didn't have a clue what was happening too much, right? I was just going by what CNN was telling us. You know, we had to go there and get this dictator out, and you know, because of the drugs, and you know, they sold it as a war on drugs type of campaign. You familiarity to nowadays, right? That's what they sold it on, right? But what I didn't know at the time, that Manuel Noriega was an agent, was an employee for the CIA since the 70s, you know, and that was part of his functions. Part of his function as an employee of the CIA was to pass drugs through, you know, to get to the East Coast of the United States, right, to finance the wars in Central America, at the time with the Reagan era and whatnot. That was part of his function, right? So it wasn't a surprise that the State Department, knew that he was trafficking with drugs because they did it with them. He was a partner, right? So at the time I didn't know that. I learned that later on. I just went by what CNN was telling us. But then they came back. Then 18 months later, they went to Iraq for the first Gulf War. And I saw that whole mobilization, right? Again, the base just emptied itself and y'all went to Iraq, right? And they went there. They called it the 100-Day War. And they started redeploying back. My dad didn't go because my dad was in instructor status, but some of my friends' parents did. So they came back with a whole bunch of war trophies, with images, pictures, and all that stuff, and stories for about Iraq back then. So my first time I seen a dead Iraqi soldier was through those pictures that they brought back. Piles of Iraqi soldiers dead. And then they were just their kids. They're just showing it around school and everything like it was trophy, like it was trading cards. That's what they were showing. They were proud of it. So I was impressed by that. Fast forward, I was in the military. I was the NCO in the military and in the Army. I was an instructor at the time. Before that, I worked in the hospital because I was a medic, and I was at NCOIC at a family practice clinic, and I saw the towers get blown up, and I saw the images of the towers get blown up. Next thing you know, we're sending forces to Afghanistan. Saw the images there. Next thing you know, the whole topic of WMD came up. Afghanistan Afghanistan was like a couple of months in. Now we're talking about we got to invade Iraq because of WMD, because of connection with Osama bin Laden, because of this and that, blah, 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 blah. I called BS on that right there and then because I remember in 1991, the first Gulf War, and I remember that throughout the whole 90s, I was impressed by it, so I kept up with the story. I remember that throughout the whole 90s, Iraq lost control of their airspace. American and British planes would patrol their skies 24/7 throughout the whole 90s, right? And they would routinely bomb Iraq throughout the whole 90s. You guys remember the whole Monica Lewinsky deal? So the whole Monica Lewinsky deal, when they came out, Clinton responded to that by bombing Iraq. Iraq was just a punching ball. Iraq was just something to bomb all the time, right? And they had at the time they had the most extreme sanction regime ever placed on any country at the time, right? Nothing can go in Iraq without the quote unquote international UN knowing about it, right? So their calorie count went down. They lost a lot of people, according to a CNN report, right? When they had Madeleine Albright talking, the CNN report said that they because of the sanction, about 500 children have died because of the sanction, and she said it was worth it, right? It was worth it because Osama's bad. No, Saddam is bad, so it's worth it because of them is bad, right? So that's collective punishment, right? But that's not counting the adults, and that's not counting mothers giving birth and everything. So roughly over 2 million people died during the 90s in Iraq because just the sanctions alone, which is so that's why I call BS when George W. Bush Jr. said that Iraq is developing weapons of mass destruction. Then Blair came out saying that they have 45 seconds, timing, or 45 minutes, I think, 45 minutes to reach a major European city with their bombs or whatever, and they had like nuclear mushrooms and stuff, images. So pretty much they were creating consent on the population, right, to consent to sending another expeditionary force to Iraq, right, and overthrow the Iraqi government at the time. So I called BS on that, and I told myself, I'm not going to take part in this. I already had 2 kids at the time. Married, established, but I left the military not too long after. Pretty much I just let my time run out, and I didn't re-enlist again. I just got out with no plan, nothing whatsoever, and pretty much struggled for a few years until I got a little bit stabilized. But yeah, so I didn't want to take part in that, and I refused to take part in that, and I didn't. I didn't take part in that. Which goes into my panel real quick before back to Rachel. So I'm supposed to talk to you about the war abroad and the war at home, right? How the war abroad and war at home connects. Most Americans do not make the connection of what it's done abroad comes back home in one way, shape, or form. They don't, most people are pretty much fixated on domestic politics and don't really follow international politics, right? So I'm just going to give you some numbers first. So first, I want to start with a quote by MLK, Martin Luther King Jr. in 1967. He says, "The bombs in Vietnam explode at home. They destroy the hopes and possibility of a decent America." I heard another quote saying, you guys heard that quote before? Right? I heard someone else say, I think it was a Black Panther, said something similar to that, saying that the bombs sent to Vietnam, right, explodes in the ghettos of America. So just to give you some numbers, the Afghanistan war, right, $2 trillion. Iraq war, $3 trillion. The Ukraine war. So Ukraine war is being sold to us here that it's a war between Russia and Ukraine, but it's actually a NATO war against Russia, right? And that's cost the United States $180 billion so far in, 4 years now? Syria, $1.7 trillion, right? $1.7 trillion to overthrow a government in Syria, right? Israel, for the last 2 years, have cost so far $120 billion. Right now, what's happening in Venezuela, Obama spent $10 million, right, while he was in power, $10 million to try to overthrow the Venezuelan government. This time around, Trump has spent $18 million per day in his operations right now in the Caribbean, right? So now that's not counting maintaining over 800 military bases abroad, right? Not to count the hundreds of military bases that exist here in the United States, installations, right? And also having ships in all corners of the seas of the global ocean, right? That's called imperialism. I mean, that's naked imperialism, right? All that total control. No other country in the world has so much control over the globe like the United States does, right? And pretty much is that when you're so focused on spending all this money to control abroad, right? You're gonna hollow the state and interior. You're gonna hollow your state. You're taking away from your citizens, right, just to maintain that control abroad, right? Meanwhile, at the same time, I think homelessness in the United States has increased for the past few years, right? Poverty has increased, right? We're having a government shutdown, which is the longest in the world, not in the world, in American history, right? I think it was 40-something days right now, 60 days. How much is it right now? The 43 days, right? And what's the holdup? The holdup is because one party wants the Affordable Care Act to expire and cut funds on Medicaid, right? So that's a holdup because they want to balance the budget. So the holdup is, right, to take away food, to take away care from its American constituents, right, just so it can be spent abroad to maintain empire, right? Fascism, right? Now fascism can be described as colonialism turned inward, right? Fascism inward, which refers to a phenomenon where fascist ideology tactics are directed against a country's own population and institution rather than primarily focusing on external enemies abroad. So pretty much fascism, what we're seeing is pretty much colonialism turned inward, fascism turned inward. The Nazis in Germany, for example, to balance the sheet, what they did, they pretty much sent a good portion of their population to work camps, another good portion of the population to the military, and ramped up the industrial military complex so they can project powers abroad, so they can control territories abroad, so they control access, so they have access to resources and wealth abroad. That's what the Nazis did. Right now we have ICE right now, right? Since this whole GWAT wars, right, going back in how colonialism turned inwards, fascism turned inward, is we're seeing how the national security state is manifesting. We're seeing how the surveillance state has started, pushing, ramping up with the Patriot Act under Bush, then it continued under Obama. Obama made it permanent, and now we're seeing it with Trump. Each time they're getting more and more violent against its own population. ICE right now is the institution that is most funded. The government institution is most funded right now, ICE, and it's to control quote unquote migrants, right? Migrants caused by destabilizing other people's countries abroad, right? According to the Brown University, the GWA, the Global War on Terror, right, displaced about 58 million people. So where are those 58 million people going to go? They're going to go somewhere. They're going to go to some more stability, right? They're usually going to come to the West, either Europe or here, right? And what is that? And what is the reaction to that? What is the what has that caused? That caused deep xenophobia in a lot of these countries. A lot of xenophobia because of these migrants coming in, because they were caused by destabilizing their countries. You know, so you see how these actions, how these wars come and boomerang and come back and hit us, right? Yeah, so back in 1992, there was this thing called the Wolfowitz Doctrine. I don't know if you guys heard about that. The Wolfowitz Doctrine. The Wolfowitz Doctrine is it's pretty much saying that the United States will not tolerate any country, any challenge, any cluster of countries who would challenge American authority. You know, the world. That's pretty much what it said, right? After the fall of the Soviet Union, the United States will not tolerate any other bloc or any other state that will challenge the United States authority or primacy. And that's what the United States has been pretty much dedicating itself since the fall of the Soviet Union, right, to maintaining primacy. And we're seeing how that primacy is shattering right now. We're seeing how the primacy is falling apart right now. And we're seeing how they're taking it on us here. We're seeing how it's coming back to us here. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, like history summed up in 10 minutes. Very difficult to do, but no, really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And it's really important to mention, right, that, you know, Giovanni mentioned Venezuela, and there's this resurgence of the Monroe Doctrine, right, like where like all of I mean, Biden called the global South or South America the front door, the front yard, and then it's always been treated as a backyard. But either way, like it's nobody's yard other than like their own, like that country's. You know, it's not the United States's, right, to decide upon or anything. And so now we'll move over to Jake to speak on immigration, National Guard deployments, and whatever else you want.
Yeah, just to briefly introduce myself, I'm Jake Tucker. I was in the United States Army from 2001 to 2009. Basically, I joined as an intelligence analyst, but then was mandatory reclassed to be an interrogator, and then deployed as an interrogator from 2007 to 2008. I won't go into why I joined. I mean, I was just in a small town in Nebraska, kind of looking for, I don't know, something beyond that, and then also college money and so on and so forth. But I did want to mention one thing that I kind of thought was that joining the Army, like I'd be in some higher echelon of people. I like literally believe this, and it was basically rendered untrue the moment I stepped into basic training. Like, it became very clear to me that the only way they really had to get people to do what they're saying is basically to just break you down as a human being. Like the entire basic training program is a dehumanization training. It took me a lot of time to really understand that that's what that was, but I hated it the moment that I stepped off the bus and basically at Fort Jackson. I hated it. I just couldn't stand how they treated us, and like I couldn't even understand why they treated us that way. But it's clear to me now because in order to turn people into the bad guy, in order to turn people into the person who will go to someone else's home, you know, and interrogate them, or point down range and pull a trigger against a child, a woman, another man, like, or to push the button that launches the drone missiles. you have to lose some of your humanity, and that's what basic training was to me. Like, and that's why I hated it, because I could like literally actively feel myself losing parts of myself while I was in basic training. So I wanted to drive that home, just to kind of set that perspective that I had, at least. I know that's not the same for everybody, but that's kind of, I didn't know what was happening to myself at the time, but so I was having this real kind of like crisis pretty much the whole time I was in the military, a crisis of consciousness, a crisis of humanity, and so on. And as Stephen was speaking, this is the first time I've heard Stephen kind of talk about his like entrance into the military and such. I was like, wow, this sounds so familiar, except Stephen was like better and more courageous than me the whole time. Like, you said the things I wanted to say. You refused to deploy when I wanted to refuse to deploy. And I just want to use that opportunity to really quickly say, and I think we'll get to the right to refuse stuff a little more in conversation, right? But this is why this campaign is super important to get out to active duty people, because I was one of those people that like, rather than having the courage of Stephen, who like stood up and then people came to him, I needed to feel that support beforehand, and I didn't see it anywhere. Like during the time, like the Iraq War and such, which I was against from the jump, and I did not want to deploy. I was stop loss to deploy, but I didn't see a visibility, you know. And I mean, this was kind of pre-social media to a degree, you know. 2007, we had MySpace and stuff coming up. But anyways, I want to like to kind of transition into talking about immigration, the war coming home, and things like that. I want to give a couple little small stories. The first one, so I joined this organization, About Face Veterans Against the War. Like Stephen, I was like, basically, I don't want anything to do with veterans. Like, I was afraid of them almost, and so on, until meeting Giovanni at a rally, and then just a few times in some activism things. I got involved with this organization, found it tremendous and really valuable for me. But then a year after I joined, in 2018, for this day, Veterans Day, Joe Biden was giving President George Bush and Laura Bush an award, I think the Liberty Medal or something, for his commitment to veterans. And as About Face, we said, this is absurd. This is insane. There is no commitment to veterans here. There is a commitment to war and leaving us high and dry, and just to deal with our traumas, with our moral injury, and so on and so forth. So we let's just call it, we deployed to Philadelphia to interrupt this gathering, which we did, and it was like a really important moment for me to kind of stand up against this. But this is bipartisanship, right? Like, this is maybe a little hot takey and maybe not entirely true, certainly not scientific, but I always kind of say, like, when you see bipartisanship, that's when you know it's terrible. Like, bipartisanship is like, everyone's like, oh, we need the bipartisanship, we need to build bipartisanship. Oh, hell no. No. It's when it's bipartisan, you know we're all getting screwed like hardcore. So when I see those two on stage together, I know this is a problem. You know, when they get along, I'm in a bad spot, and I know my people are in a bad spot. So that's one story I wanted to say. And then the following year, 2019, the first year we had our gallery here, again, so it was a great gallery, great opening night, and all these things. But then for Veterans Day, I think maybe it was a Monday, maybe a Tuesday then too. I don't remember for sure. But the weather, it turned beautiful today. But similarly, we had this cold snap. It got rainy, super windy, and nobody came to the last day on Veterans Day. So here we have this Veterans gallery, right? And on Veterans Day, nobody came. Not veterans, not nobody. Not young people that we wanted to see, just we had like one outside attendee come the whole day. And that wasn't the worst part of the day by any stretch. The worst part of the day was that this was the day that Bolivia fell to a right-wing fascistic coup. And nobody not in San Antonio anyways, was speaking out against it publicly. And I mean, I was just feeling devastated. Here we are again, executing a coup d'etat in a country we have no right to say your democracy is valid or invalid. I can tell you about the invalidity of our democracy. Our democracy, to me, is clearly a democracy of, by, and for the rich. And so I don't think we have any right to tell anybody else how their democracy should work, how their government should work, or whatever. And Elon Musk, who was a strong Democrat supporter at the time, what did he say? We coup who we want, deal with it. Why? Because he wants Bolivia's lithium resources, right? And so I'm seeing, you know, by this time I had studied and I know so much more history than I did when I was 18 and joining the army. I'm seeing the fall of our bands in Guatemala. I mean, I'm seeing the dirty wars of Central America. I'm seeing Bay of Pigs in Cuba. I'm seeing you know, all as was mentioned, the Monroe Doctrine. I'm seeing all these things, the propping up of right-wing governments in Mexico, Colombia, the fascism in Brazil and Argentina. I'm seeing it happening in Bolivia, and we're all just being quiet. We're all just staying silent. And so these are the things that drive, you know, and then I'm seeing Bolivians that are going to have to flee this fascistic coup. They're going to have to flee. You know, at the time I was working at a hotel, and one of my good friends was a Chilean woman who her own family were labor organizers in Chile at the time of the Pinochet dictatorship, right? And so her family had to flee, and she spent most all of her money sending it back to her son in Chile because they had privatized their whole education system. And so in order, well, not the whole, but basically any quality education you had to pay in Chile. And so she would send so much of her salary at the hotel back home so that her son could get a decent education in Chile and not the terrible, gutted public education system that they had after privatization. And that's similar to what we're seeing now in the U.S. with the U.S.'s public education. So anyways, I'm just seeing all these different things with regard to Bolivia, and I'm seeing that we're gonna need to take in Bolivian refugees fleeing the violence of a right-wing fascistic government. And thankfully, to a certain degree, the struggle continues, but to a certain degree, Bolivia got back on top of its democracy, back on top of its sovereignty, and was able to restore that which was stolen from them. And so, you know, as we talk about immigration and when we talk about the violence against immigrants here, we need to recognize, as was kind of stated, but like these are conditions created in Washington, delivered to the capitals and other other locales, and then forcing that back upon us, and then we exact the violence against immigrants again here. So what are our deployments here? Our deployments are just cleaning some of the mess that our foreign policy created abroad, and this cycle has continued for the entirety of the existence of the United States. And then just the last thing I want to mention, am I way over time? Okay. Okay. The last thing I really want to mention is, you know, as we see the means of violence, whether it be troops, militarized police, Department of Homeland Security, whatever, unleashed upon our people here in the United States, immigrant or otherwise, of course, right? I'm reminded about how, like, the war on drugs, war on terror is basically being combined into one singular thing. And that if you look at the drug epidemics in the United States, at least since World War II, they track with whatever our foreign policy is doing at the exact same time. So you can look at methamphetamine and basically just amphetamine usage spiking in the 50s. That comes directly from the usage of amphetamine, heavy use of amphetamines by Nazis in Germany. And then you look at like the heroin epidemic of the 60s and 70s. That was coming to the United States through governmental means, Air America and such, by CIA and so on and so forth. That was coming into the U.S. from Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. Then you look at the cocaine and crack cocaine epidemics of the 80s and 90s, what was going on then. Of course, that trafficking was coming through Central America and Colombia, and basically, as Giovanni mentioned about Panama, basically being used to fund the Contras. And then, you know, and then you look at another opioid epidemic in the United States through the 2000s. What happened there? Afghanistan, right? Like, so before the U.S. invades Afghanistan, and I'm not vouching for any form of government per se, but the Taliban had basically driven the poppy production. They banned it and drove it straight into the ground. The U.S. invades. Opium skyrockets. Why? Because the U.S.'s friends in Afghanistan were the warlords, the drug lords of Afghanistan, which basically revitalized the poppy industry in Afghanistan immediately upon our invasion, so that they could help fund their fellow warlord friends in Afghanistan. So, you know, we talk about the crime and the drug overdoses and whatever in our homes and stuff like this. Like, so much of this, I'm not going to say all of it, but so much of it is driven by our foreign policy and cahoots with basically what actually aids the local oligarchs in our communities and such, which is basically broken people in a broken society fighting against each other, blaming the addicts, blaming the homeless, blaming whoever, so that we don't point our fingers up to the very, very top where this all starts, begins, and ends. Like, and so I'll hold there and yeah.
Woo. Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, thank you so much. And so now I have a couple of questions, and then we can, like, if folks have questions that they want to ask. But yeah, so the first question I have here is, as we face the cut on SNAPs, healthcare, housing, etc., why do you think essentially there's always money for the means of violence, and it's always expanded, right? Like, even locally, like our police budget's expanded at least a little bit, or not a little bit, like millions, every year, and so is the Department of Defense or Department of War, whatever the fuck. They're always expanding, but there's never money, like. And there's never money for the things that, like, the people actually need. Why do our needs keep shrinking, like, from the government's responsibility? And then, like, what does this say about our quote unquote democracy or lack thereof? And then how does that play into the idea of our right to refuse orders campaign? That's a lot of questions.
I think the reason why we fund so much militarism, not just because it's very profitable for some people, but also it's because the rich are really afraid. Yes. And I don't know, like, should we make them more afraid? You know, like, would that just make the police budgets go higher? But they should be afraid, and we should be more organized, but people really should interpret that as fear. There's so many indicators that the rich are terrified because the numbers are on our side. You know, we pay the taxes, but they choose where it goes. Even if they're paying a lot, it's nothing compared to their own income. But they're so afraid of Mamdani and that they're gonna take it away. It's like, you just have it in a bank somewhere. It's not yours, you stole it to begin with. Anyway, so I'm not sure, the right to refuse orders. I think we should be linking capitalism with the military, because it isn't the people's military. We're not doing what is good for the people of the United States. We're doing what's good for the capitalists of the United States. We're taking orders for our whole mob system of going out and stealing shit. And the people who benefit are not sending their children. The corporations that benefit and those families have never served and never will, and think we're all stupid because we are being stupid. We should not be working for them. But
Yeah, thank you.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but just to be clear, the conversation, the questions are for everyone, right? Well, we'll take the mic to you if you have something to say.
I just had a comment about your
Question. And I remember Iran and Iraq, before the war, the
United States made quite a killing selling weapons to both.
Yep. Oh, yes.
And I think, the sale, and this gets back to corporate advantage again, the sale of weapons has always been top priority to the powers that be, whatever powers those happen to be. And then, you get into, wars are very useful as testing grounds. Vietnam was very useful to test Agent Orange, even though it killed a whole bunch of veterans, but it was very useful as far as corporate testing in ways that could not have been tested in any other way. So, I think finances is a big deal there, because even in the wars that are going on right now, there's a lot being spent, but, the weapons dealers are making a lot of money off of, every conflict that's going on right now.
Yeah, that's a really good point, right? I mean, and we know as like service members and soldiers, like we get tested first with all sorts of shit, like anthrax, H1N1, like all sorts of vaccines, like we're tested on. And yeah, we're profiteers, right? I think all of that is super important with the Right to Refuse campaign, right? Because it's like, the more that we're able to talk about like how the war profits, how profitable war is, how we're being used as pawns, in every single way, like for the continuation and expansion of profits for the rich. I mean, nobody wants to be a part of that. But we also have to link it with, the poverty draft. We have to link it with like, we need to fight for our basic needs, right? Because a lot of I joined the military for college money, So I think it's all of our duties really to make those links, to be very public about these things. And like Jake said, to be so loud that the people in all of the freaking 5 bases that we have in Military City, USA, to know that we're here for them. Anybody else have some comments on this?
Comment, what you said. So that's interesting what you were saying. I was thinking a few things while you were saying that. During the Panama invasion, the Panamanian army was smaller than the NYPD at the time, right? It was smaller than NYPD. But the army, the U.S. military went in hard, really, really hard, and just bombed the hell out of El Chorrillo, for example. They most of the operations were in the poor areas of Panama, not the wealthier Panama. The wealthier Panama were just like today in Venezuela. The wealthy area of Panama were celebrating it. We're celebrating, whereas the poor section of Panama were the one who were feeling the brunt of all these violence. And what caught my eye with what you just said there is because that's where a lot of new military equipment was tested on in the Panama, which would then be used at the first Gulf War. Like the Humvee was used there for the first time. The Bradley was there for the first time. I think the Apache helicopter was used there for the first time in Panama. So they went really hard in Panama. What it was to test weapons to go to the next war. on that as well, I just got a little anecdote. Is when I was in the military, when I was an instructor up in Fort Benning, when we didn't have class, we had to we pretty much fix or created or fix our situation lanes. We call 6 lane situation lanes for the students and whatnot. And then we'll go in the field and we did obstacle course for them and stuff like that. So while we didn't have class, we have to go and do maintenance on it. We had to maintain them, right? So we were going to do this brand new awesome thing that our captain wanted us to do. So we had to get wood. We had to get lumber. So we went to the local lumber store in downtown Columbus, and we're all uniform to buy some lumber to do that the job we was going to do. So there were about 4 of us that went down. So the I want to say it was 84 Lumber. I was some lumber company. I forgot the name of the company. So when we got all the lumber, everything we needed, all the lumber, we were one of us had the impact card. The impact card is the government card. And I remember the guy at the store asked us, "So who is this for? Is it for you personally or for the government?" I said, "Why does it matter?" "Well, if it's for the government, I'll have to charge him this ridiculous inflated amount of money. But if it's for you, then I will charge you this." So the guy that was with us, he had when we had the car, so he bought the lumber on his personal card, and then we did a reimbursement. He did a reimbursement for it. But that got me thinking is that a lot of what you say in the military-industrial complex in the United States is privatized. All of them are privatized. And they charge an extra amount of money for useless things, useless weapons. If we look at the Ukraine war right now, they thought that they're pumping so much money into these weapons, into this into all these capabilities and weapons and instruments or whatever, and still Russia with a smaller budget than the American budget, a smaller military budget, right, are able to produce massive amount of weapons better than what the West is producing, that's spending an extraordinary amount of money on them, right? And they're not even performing well. So what it is pretty much they're stealing, it's all our tax money, because what it is, the transfer of wealth, because we're paying taxes into it. So they're transferring wealth, right, into these private companies to build these useless weapons. So yes, and they're being lucrative, and they're all over the country. Each state, even here in San Antonio, there's weapon companies here. There's like 3 or 4 weapons companies here in San Antonio. Also, right, Congress people are pretty much they fund the campaigns. Congress people pretty much they get lobbied for them. Or they get lobbied by them to keep them in their cities and whatnot, with the promise of jobs and everything like that. But what it is still a transfer of wealth that are being taken from us to them, and they're living and they're living it up, and then we're here getting our benefits cut.
Yes. And I did want to mention with the Right to Refuse campaign, we have gone and spoken, or representatives from the local chapter went and spoke to Congressman Castro about his support for the Right to Refuse campaign, and he was pretty receptive to it. And so that's a lot of what the campaign is like all over the place, like people reaching out to their Congress people to really help codify the right to refuse, or the expansion of the rights of service members into law. I have a second question, unless somebody else wants to say something. Okay.
I just want to speak real quick, hopefully real quick, on the Right to Refuse campaign. Like, one of the things that I think people will be most concerned about is, I'm not, because I don't like any of the U.S. wars anyways. But anyways, about readiness, right? One of the bigger pushback things is like, oh, well, if soldiers can refuse to do these orders, and they can just claim, oh, it's immoral or something like that, right? Then the readiness will suffer. Because everything's always about readiness, so they say. What has our readiness been in the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War? What is readiness when you're not fighting for anything that you can actually feel as someone who signed up for certain values and you're being deployed for completely other values? Like, what is readiness at that point? Now you're just basically throwing us into a war we don't want to be in without any understanding of why we're in these wars. We are not going to be a good fighting force if that's the conditions in which we find ourselves in, because the U.S. has demonstrated that it can bomb anybody to smithereens, but it cannot win militarily against any real significant fighting force, because as soon as it breaks down into the people versus the occupying force, the U.S. has gotten its ass handed to it by the occupying force and kicked out every single time. And so they may claim readiness is the issue, but what seems clear to me is that they don't care about whether we're ready or not. The U.S. people who make the people who make the decisions to send us to war are perfectly fine with creating chaos in a foreign land and letting us be on the ground to deal with that chaos that they create. And so it's not like, if we want to have actual readiness, we have to have education about the conflicts we're fighting in. And then we need to have buy-in from the people who are there to do it. And just using, and this is predominant in every military incursion, just using racial slurs and basically just demonizing the other side isn't going to cut it. You have to have a deep buy-in of why this is necessary for our, not just the national security of the corporations who care about this, but why this affects the families I signed up to protect against enemies and so on and so forth. How is this actually supposed to affect our lives, and why is this necessary to go and protect in those ways? So the readiness, you'll miss me with the readiness argument, because on the one hand, from their perspective, readiness would be enhanced if you have buy-in from the soldiers that you're sending to do their bidding. And then on the other hand, they'll never do that, because they don't send us to justified wars. They send us to the wars they want for the reasons they want that have no benefit to us. So.
Can I add something to that?
Yes.
Sorry, I know you're trying to keep to a schedule.
No, all good. We need all.
Hi, my name is Mike Bender. I'm a 22-year Air Force veteran. And something you just said, and something that you said earlier, really struck me. And that is that we can't underestimate the degree to which white supremacy has been profitable for the wealthy. And as long as they can keep me, a middle-aged white man, afraid of black and brown people, they can do whatever they want, whether it's going and putting ICE troops into our cities, whether it's, as you were saying, dehumanizing our enemy abroad. Just look. You can look at the Bugs Bunny cartoons from the 1940s and how they portrayed Japanese, buck teeth and squinting eyes, and and comical, and American Indians as well, and you were talking earlier about the price of so many of these wars, $800 billion, $900 billion. None of them are as much as Elon Musk is about to start making per year. What value does Tesla or SpaceX really produce that warrants giving one man $1 trillion? It's unspeakable, unimaginable wealth that could be used so much better. And you made a mention of Zoran Mamdani and how the wealthy are afraid of him. The most exciting progressive voices right now are all people of color, whether it's him or AOC or Jasmine Crockett. The wealthy are terrified of these people because they're calling bullshit on everything. And I just learned about y'all, this organization, a couple of days ago. I'm so grateful I'm here. Thank you for hosting this. That's all I got. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Really, really great comments. And I mean, and you can see there, I'll be right with you, the extractive freaking processes of Tesla, right? With Bolivia, and then also how awful they are in that area of Texas near the border, right? Just colonizing it, stealing land, water, resources, data center, you name it, right? Offer his little empire, which the U.S. just let them do it. It's both Democrats and Republicans, so both of them. Here you go.
Can you hear me? My name is Martha Spinks. I'm a retired Army officer, 24 years. And I was in Just Cause. And it was the first time in my life that I felt like I was expendable. As a military person, my family was there too. And they manipulated threat warnings every day so that you didn't know if it was okay or not okay or how okay to go into Panama City. And as far as I'm concerned, the way the situation was set up so that we could justify the final decision. I mean, we knew it was coming. We knew they were going to invade Panama. But there had to be a provocation. And the provocation was that we were never sure what the threat level was in the city because they were continually changing it. So one evening, Lieutenant Paz and 3 of his friends went into Panama City to have dinner. And they ran into the Panamanian Defense Force gate that was blocking off the Comandancia. They got lost downtown. And they were afraid, so they just turned around and drove away instead of waiting for the soldier to come to their vehicle. And as they drove away, the PDF fired at the vehicle and killed Lieutenant Paz. And it was the next day that President Bush announced that we were going to invade. But there had been a whole series of situations going on for a few months because of this manipulation of the threat level in a lot of cases where Americans were being harassed and occasionally being, detained for a little while. Very similar to what we're seeing with ICE now, only it was American citizens. And Bush was just full of righteous indignation about the way Americans were being treated, and that justified launching this war. But let me tell you my favorite story about Just Cause, because maybe it'll give you a little hope. At the time that we invaded Panama, I was in the Pentagon and not directly involved in the planning, but aware of it because I was representing the Army in Southcom. And I worked for a general who was the commander of the Army there in Panama, who objected and actually sent in his resignation, and I had to carry it to the chief of staff, objected to what they were doing to try to start a war. And he had a very good relationship with the people of Panama because he grew up in South Texas and he speaks South Texas Spanish. And he was just a regular guy. And I always believed that if he had stayed in Panama, they would have elected him president. But he had so much credibility with the Panamanians. He knew the invasion was coming. So he actually organized a phone bank in the command headquarters of NCOs who could speak Spanish. And as soon as the invasion started, he had his NCOs contact the outlying posts where Panamanian soldiers were and said to them, General, I'm not going to tell you his name. The general is telling you that if you will put down your arms, that you are much less likely to get killed. Just lay down arms and you'll probably be okay. And they believed him because he had a lot of credibility. And that's exactly the way it worked. So there could have been a lot more casualties than there were. And the other thing that made me feel really expendable was we were in the process of transferring the Panama Canal to Panama. And so we had General Noriega's headquarters sitting in the middle of a family housing area and other kinds of Panamanian offices and posts and so on mixed in with family housing. And our military ran through family housing, attacking the Panamanians there as family members were in their homes. It's just extraordinary to me that they did that. We have a very narrow mission by comparison to what you guys are trying to address. I'm acquainted with Ryan, I'm acquainted with Jake, you know, we've talked to them before, and I'm on board with everything that you're saying. But what we have decided is most useful that we can do right now is to narrow the mission down to two things. We're going to talk to community groups and individuals and explain to them why this is a dangerous war. And I'm sorry, a dangerous use of the military, what's wrong with it and what it can lead to. And within that, we're also talking to people because they are parents and grandparents of people who are in the military or the Guard, and explaining to them about unlawful orders. And in fact, you guys allowed us to use your push cards, and we've been passing those out along with other information that we're compiling about what people can do if they're concerned about an illegal order. And we're also talking to these parents and grandparents about, don't let your kid be in a situation where they're in Chicago and someone tells them to shoot and they don't know what to do. Talk to them now, because we think it could eventually come to that. And the very least that we think we can do that would be helpful is to give families an opportunity to talk about this as a reality and consider what the alternatives are. So I brought our brochures in case anyone wants to see what it is that we're trying to do, and always looking for people who are interested in going out and doing that communication. And we'd probably be seen as a much more traditional kind of group than About Face, and which gives us some advantages. You know, like the Ladies Library Club and the Northwest Democrats will invite us over to talk to them, which is exactly what we've been doing. We've been invited to speak to the graduating class of the Veterans Court. So that was kind of amazing to me that they would be receptive to that. Tonight, to celebrate Veterans Day, we're all getting together at the Tandem Bar, or also Tandem Coffee House, to tell stories. The veterans are going to tell stories. And it's intentionally not political. We want to create a place where people can just come and get acquainted and find out who we are. And then we'll try to engage them.
Awesome. No, thank you so much. So it's like to bring it back to like the Right to Refuse campaign. I'm just gonna have like a couple of closing questions. So like, why do we think it's important to recognize that we are interconnected with the people facing down the U.S. war machine abroad and not in our borders? So, for example, like standing up in our communities is vital. And of course, like, as we've been talking about this whole conversation, right, like other countries, right, are the ones that have felt the wrath throughout the existence of the United States. And so why is it important to really connect like what is happening in our streets today with that we have caused like abroad and continue to do? Does that make sense? See? What's the importance of us identifying like the National Guard deployments that we think are just a waste of dangerous military use of the military, right? But how has it been a dangerous use of the military to go abroad and fight wars of resources, extraction, and empire? Like, what connects them, you know? And how can we in connecting them and thinking about like the Right to Refuse campaign, how does connecting them like help our struggle forward, right? So that we're not just alone here in the United States, right? But we see the importance of global solidarity, like against this war machine. Does that make sense? Is anybody that hasn't spoken? Okay.
Comrade, my name's Ryan David, member of About Face Veterans Against the War. I think this helps. How do we connect? As my other comrade said, one way of looking at fascism is it's imperialism turned inwards. I don't say that lightly. Coming out of the military, I learned a lot. I preach on this a lot, is learning about Pinochet and Allende and how we participated in that, how we backed a fascist dictator to slaughter, murder 40,000 civilians that we know about, disappear. And then people say we didn't directly participate in that. Even the CIA admits all of this because they declassify things every so amount of years and then say, yeah, we did that, but we're not doing it now. And but we did directly participate in that. We sent people who are part of our government. We sent funding to back this fascist dictator who was capitalist friendly, and we murdered and overthrew people, and we directly participated in that. And so when the more I learn about our politics, because I was like, what does democracy mean? What is a Democrat? You know, what is a Republican? What do these words mean? And I simply just started Googling things and then just learning about all kinds of like political ideologies and what they mean in context. The idea that our country has been ratcheted further and further to the right, that you have Democrats now who are literal conservatives who used to be what Republicans were. We do have people in this country, and mostly the voting people, right? Because I do distinguish the difference between, and it's not a hard line, there's all kinds of fuzzy lines and things in between, but, you know, deploying citizens to oppress other citizens is the same thing that we do in other countries. It's simply the chickens coming home to roost. It's just now that to some extent, some people in the United States are going, oh, I don't like this. I want to go back to my Starbucks. And, you know, it's like, okay, well, if you don't want it to happen to you, if you don't want it to happen to your children or your grandchildren, they're going to be like, why didn't they do anything about it? Because the more I learn about history, the more it makes sense to me. You know, people get master's degrees, these kinds of things, still people listen to them. And then even people sit on panels with master's degrees and doctorate degrees and argue over this stuff. But, you know, when you have experts in fascism and experts in the Holocaust and different genocides, and I've taken a lot of those classes myself, telling you that this is fascism and can literally just lay out those kinds of things, what fascism is, and fascism grows in, you know, whether it's a neo-fascism or some variation there, far right wing, that's more of a semantical battle, but they're kind of falling into the same bucket. And when we see these things happening in our streets, when we see police literally murdering people, you know, at point blank range, we see it on video and the other cop does nothing about it. You know, it plays into those, well, who are these people serving? You know, like who does our military serve? Who were we serving while we were in the military? You know, the fact that I witnessed the oppression of other working class people, rather poor working class people, from other countries being taken advantage of, working for us, but not for us because they were working for the Kuwaiti government. But yet they were working for us. They were doing all the shit work that we didn't do. And then the Kuwaiti government just decides not to pay them, you know, which is human trafficking, by the way. And they take their passports away, and I fucking participated in that. So like watching this come home and watching, you know, this happen, it's when you're part of the imperial core, you are shielded from these concepts and seeing how they're interconnected. And yes, it's a broader thing than any one of us, but the counter to fascism is community. So, thank you.
So, on the connectedness of things, I think the most famous conscious objector in history is Muhammad Ali. And he had some great quotes. They're all great. But about this issue, about the Vietnam War, he said, "No Viet Cong ever called me. I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong. I will not go 10,000 miles to help kill innocent people." And he talked all about how the draft targets the poor and minorities and the wealthy avoid service. And in my work, highlighting the commonalities among people, like if you go to a border town, on either side of the border, the people have the same lives. They go to the same stores, they eat the same foods, they're related by blood. And they have so much more in common with their own capital towns of their state and the ruling people of their country, but they're pitted against each other because that's profitable. But yeah, and when I organized a delegation to Israel and Palestine, I picked the name and I chose Dialogue Against Militarism. We were going to Israel and Palestine to talk to high school students who are refusing mandatory induction into the Israeli Defense Forces IDF, and also other people, Palestinians resisting occupation. But Dialogues Against Militarism, DAM, DOM, is a phonetic spelling of blood in both Hebrew and Arabic. And I just found that, I mean, I love it when two different languages share words, but those two languages share the word for blood, essentially, and that's really deep.
Okay, really quick,
Can I just say one thing about the Dom?
really fast.
Modern Hebrew was actually used Arabic to recreate itself. So Old Hebrew and Modern Hebrew are effectively different languages. So there's no coincidence there. They use the language to revert itself.
The more we know. Okay, anybody else have anything to say on this question? Okay, so I think we're just gonna, wrap it up. I think one of the things, and thanks for sharing, Martha, right? That y'all are going out and speaking to people and using our handy dandy stickers. So that's our responsibility, right? We do have to go out, talk to people, like spread awareness about the necessity at home and abroad to end the war machine. To end imperialism. We do need to make links, talk to folks that things don't have to be this way, right? And they're worse now, but they have been horrible for so many of our people in the United States, especially like our poor communities of color. And so definitely get involved. If you're not in an organization, join an organization. If you would like to learn more about Face Veterans Against the War, feel free to talk to any of us. And if you want to join it, feel free to talk to any of us as well. But I am going to give everybody some stickers so that you can go out and place it somewhere. And then, the more people that do this kind of work, like thank you. The more areas will reach, right? And thank you, Deceleration, Marisol and Greg, for being here and recording it. I hope this was a good conversation, and happy to have more talks after this. So thank you so much.
To connect with the South Texas chapter of About Face Veterans Against the War, look for them on Facebook or Instagram. To view images from the gallery exhibit, visit Deceleration at Deceleration.news. We encourage you to support community gallery spaces like Galeria E.V.A and South Flores, and to support us, your local grassroots media, by reading and sharing our stuff and subscribing to our newsletter. As nonprofits of all kinds come under increasing attack, direct reader support becomes increasingly important to what we do. So, if our work is helpful at all in what you do, please consider supporting us at Deceleration.news. Till next time, paz.